Victory's illusion. The galaxy had never witnessed such a celebration. 1,000 ships sparkled across the void hulls, catching the light of a dozen suns as they swept through space in tight, choreographed formation. War banners unfurled in the digital ether music from 100 worlds filled the comms, and the stars themselves seemed to pulse in time with the triumph. The Galactic fleet, mighty and proud, was basking in the afterglow of victory. Decades of bloodshed against the Claytheran swarm had finally ended. The swarm's hive mind had shattered. Its once frenzied drones now drifted lifelessly, abandoned by the consciousness that once bound them. Across the fleet, commanders and crews celebrated with abandon. On the flagship Ecliptica, a vessel the size of a moon, the revelry reached its peak. Its polished decks gleamed under floodlights in beings of every shape and size, from feathered Vaxilon to crystalline Mirians. Locked appendages toasted to survival and sang songs older than most stars. Here, surrounded by joy and relief, stood me, a human, Kyle Rener, liaison officer from Earth. One of the few representatives of my species allowed aboard the Ecliptica. Technically, we'd been allies, latecomers to the Galactic Concord, a ragtag world from a backwater system, but we'd proved ourselves. Our ships had fought in brutal skirmishes. Our soldiers had bled in the same trenches, and our engineers had pulled wrecked cruisers back from the brink more times than I could count. Still, I always felt like an outsider. They treated me with respect. Polite smiles, translated pleasantries. But beneath the formalities, I sensed it, that subtle flicker in their eyes. Amusement, pity, maybe even fear to them. Humans were a curiosity. Apes with sharp minds and violent instincts. Useful but strange. The Admiralty, for all their grandeur, always seemed to keep us at arm's length. Earth had joined the war late. We'd sent only a fraction of the ships, others did. Our worlds were modest, our weapons crude by galactic standards, until we made them work. We always made them work. I'd heard the jokes in mess halls, the whispers in hangar bays. Careful with the Terrans, they break everything, then make it mean something. I stood now on the observation deck, a drink in my hand, something bioluminescent and bitter, watching the celebration unfold. Below, light displays danced between ships. Mock dogfights played out as holograms, and every channel buzzed with laughter, music, and the long overdue sound of peace. A Vaxilon singer stepped onto a shimmering platform in the center of the fleet. Her voice, a blend of sonic frequencies and psychic echoes, ripped through the comms. I felt it in my bones, the pain of war, the joy of survival, the hope of peace. She sang like she had survived 100 wars and still had the strength to mourn each one. I took a long sip and exhaled, letting the sound wash over me. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe it was over. And yet something crawled at the back of my mind. A weight, not a thought, not even a memory, just a presence, cold and heavy like a hand placed on my shoulder in the dark. I frowned and glanced at the communications officer nearby, a wiry creature with feathers for hair and multicolored skin that shimmered with mood. She was hunched over her console, her talons tapping far faster than usual. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Noise," she muttered without looking up. Long-range scanners picking up interference. Probably debris, stray, swarm tech. She shrugged, but her feathers twitched an unconscious gesture of unease. "We'll filter it." I nodded, but unease prickled at the back of my neck. I stared back into the void where celebrations still blazed like a festival fire. But the feeling didn't leave me. It deepened. Beneath all the joy, all the relief I felt at the silence, Earth hadn't sent a message since the war ended. No communiques, no diplomats, no cheers, just silence. Too much silence. I'd reported it, briefed my superiors. They'd nodded, taken notes, dismissed it. Humans are insular, they'd said. They're grieving, rebuilding. We'll reach them when they're ready. But deep down, I knew better. We don't stay silent unless we're planning something. And that hand on my shoulder, the one no one else could feel, it was getting heavier. The shadow that returns. The alarms didn't sound right away. No flashing lights, no klaxons. Just silence, and then static. The observation deck's hollow displays flickered, and the celebration stuttered as the fleet's attention shifted to something on the edges of space. The Vaxilon singer fell quiet mid-note. Ships paused mid-formation. Across the flagship Ecliptica, an eerie calm began to creep through the revelers like a cold wind through an open airlock. The comms officer's talons tapped even faster now. Her feathers flared, stiff with alarm. "I'm getting a wall of signatures," she whispered. "It's not swarm." The admirals gathered quickly. Their celebratory garb barely removed their expressions. changing from joy to practiced authority. Holograms bloomed across the command. Deus starfields alive with movement. Blips, dozens, hundreds, then thousands. Forming a line, Noah Blade. They're coming in fast. Someone called formation is impossible. Coordinated. Kyle pushed to the front of the crowd, forcing his way past bewildered officers and stunned crew. The holographic star map expanded, revealing a horrifying silhouette forming in the void. It was a fleet, but not the Concords, not the swarms. His stomach dropped. He recognized those hull designs. The sharp, angular structure. The utilitarian gray, almost brutalist in aesthetic. But this was a nightmare evolution of Earth's warships. These weren't the patched-together vessels Kyle had grown up admiring, the scrappy frigates and nimble corvettes that had helped win battles by sheer ingenuity. These were Titans, vast silhouettes blotted out starlight as they emerged from FTL quarters. Engine flares lit up with an unnatural green glow unlike anything Kyle had seen in the Terran Navy. Each ship looked more like a mobile weapons platform than a vessel, a fortress in motion. His voice cracked as he muttered, "That's Earth's fleet." A ripple passed through the command deck like a wave of electricity. The Vaxilon Admiral, a tall, scaled Regal, rounded on Kyle, his molten eyes flaring. "Rener," he hissed, his voice a thunderous growl. "What is this?" I don't know," Kyle stammered. Earth's command didn't say anything. "No transmissions," the comms officer said, barely above a whisper. "No hails, no identity beacons. They're not responding, not even pinging the registry. They're flying cold silent, predatory. Weapons charges registered across a dozen Terran vessels. Their turrets rotated with inhuman precision. Energy spines lit along the dorsal ridges of the lead dreadnought. Defensive grid, online barked a Mirian technician, his crystalline limbs flaring with panic. They're within firing range in 30 seconds. Raise shields, the Admiral snapped. Form ranks, do not engage unless fired upon. Kyle stared at the display. The Terran fleet had not slowed, not deviated. They were heading directly for the center of the fleet's celebration arc, right through the flagship formation. Weapons hot. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. This wasn't posturing. This wasn't an exercise. This was a spear through the heart of the galaxy's pride. A voice behind him, a subordinate from the diplomatic corps, muttered, "It's an error. Maybe their systems are glitched. Maybe they don't know we're here." But Kyle knew better. He'd grown up under the iron skies of Earth. He knew how his people planned, how they waited, how they struck. Silence from Earth didn't mean nothing was happening. It meant everything was happening and no one was supposed to know. And now it was too late. The comms officer's talons froze. "They're locking weapons," she said. Across the line, all of them. The admirals roared into action. Orders echoed through the deck in every known language. War protocols engaged. Shields flared across the fleet like blossoms of blue light. Still no communication came from the Terran ships. Then the first lance of white fire erupted. It cut across the void like a scalpel, striking a Concord cruiser dead center. One moment the ship was intact. The next it was peeling apart like paper in a furnace, its hull erupting in a blinding inferno. A scream, real and over comms, ripped through the Ecliptica. Panic tore across the fleet, celebratory formations shattered. Command ships scrambled to realign into defense. Gun platforms activated too late. The Terran ships moved with ruthless grace, no hesitation, no waste, just destruction. Kyle was frozen, his breath locked in his lungs as the hull around him vibrated with the tremor of long-range weapons fire. The Vaxilon Admiral grabbed him by the collar. "If this is your betrayal, human." "It's not," Kyle shouted. "I swear I didn't know." But the words rang hollow, because deep in his gut something twisted. Earth had always been patient, always underestimated, always biding its time. And now it had come back to collect voices from home. The Ecliptica shuddered under a fresh barrage. Emergency klaxons finally wailed, painting the bridge in red. Holographic screens blinked with status. Reports, damage, casualties. Critical systems failing. Officers barked orders in overlapping languages, trying to mount a coordinated defense against something they didn't understand. Earth's fleet wasn't attacking like soldiers. They were dismantling systematically. Kyle staggered back to the communications console, blood pounding in his ears. The holo display showed Concord ships, once proud flagships of the war effort, breaking apart under relentless Terran fire. The dreadnoughts didn't need finesse. Their firepower carved through shields like cloth. The smaller Terran corvettes were worse, darting in surgical swarms, targeting engine cores and weapons arrays with terrifying precision. It wasn't just an assault, it was an execution. And still, no message, no warning. Kyle fumbled with the comms array, punching in every Earth frequency he knew. Military, diplomatic, old civilian hailing codes from before the war. Static answered him, cold, impenetrable. Then, a flicker, a voice low and distorted. Kyle Rener. His hands froze, his breath caught. That voice, it knew his name. "This is Rener," he replied louder than he intended. The bridge around him stilled. All eyes turned to him. "I repeat, identify yourself. What is happening?" The line crackled. "You don't recognize me," the voice said, calm and unsettling. "You will soon." Kyle's fingers trembled. "Tell the Concord," the voice continued to stand down. "This doesn't have to be a slaughter." Kyle swallowed hard. "We're allies," he said. "We fought together." "What the hell are you doing?" The voice laughed, a short, cold bark. "Allies, is that what they told you?" The channel went dead. The Admiral stormed toward him, claws clenched, fangs bared. "What was that?" "They told us to stand down," Kyle said, dazed. "They said it's not too late." The Admiral's eyes burned. "You expect us to believe them after this?" A fresh tremor rocked the deck. Another Concord cruiser blinked out on the hollow display. The Vaxilone Admiral turned to his weapons officers. "Return fire, maximum spread. Target the lead Terran dreadnought. They'll kill us all," Kyle whispered, but no one heard or no one cared. Concord guns roared to life. The display flared as beams lanced out from Ecliptica's main batteries. Explosions sparked across the Terran ship's hull, but it didn't stop. The dreadnought absorbed the hits like a beast shrugging off flies, then it responded. A single beam of green light, unlike any energy signature Kyle had ever seen, tore through Ecliptica's starboard side. The deck pitched violently. Sparks erupted. Consoles exploded. Screams, pain, fire. Kyle slammed against the bulkhead. His ears rang. The bridge filled with smoke and the scent of burning circuits. A section of the wall was gone, vaporized beyond its space. He scrambled up, coughing, eyes watering. The Admiral was still standing, barely blood dripping from a slash across his chest. His voice was raw, barely audible. "What are they?" Kyle didn't answer, because he didn't know anymore. Earth hadn't just returned stronger, it had returned transformed. He staggered back to the comms console and reopened the channel. "This is Kyle Rener," he said into the static. "Please talk to me." The voice came back, no longer distorted, and no longer unfamiliar. Kyle, his breath stopped. He knew that voice now. Mara, Captain Mara Voss, his old commanding officer, the woman who'd led him through the worst of the Swarm War. She'd vanished 2 years ago, reassigned. He'd been told Kyle had grieved her like a sister. "You're leading this," he said. "Yes." "Why?" Silence. "Then because they left us behind." The words hit harder than any weapon. Kyle's thoughts reeled. "We fought beside them. You can't blame everyone." "We don't," she said. "Just the ones who made the decisions. The ones who watched us starve after the war ended. The ones who used us, then discarded us." Kyle gripped on the console. "And this is your answer, Slaughter." "It's justice." Another Concord ship disintegrated on the screen. The fleet was breaking. "Come back," he said quietly. "We can fix this. I can help." Her tone shifted softer. "You're one of us, Kyle. I remember that. But don't stand in our way. You won't be spared a second time." The channel cut again. Behind him, the Admiral collapsed, blood seeping through his uniform. The bridge was nearly lost. Kyle stood among the wreckage, breath, shallow eyes locked on the broken stars. They were no longer at war with the swarm. Now they were at war with the ones who'd survived it. The choice. Smoke filled the bridge. The air was thick with heat and ozone. Kyle wiped soot from his face as the remnants of the Ecliptica's crew scrambled to maintain systems. But the truth hung in the air, as heavy as the ash. This ship was dying. Earth's fleet moved in like a storm front, casting long shadows across the crippled galactic formation. The dreadnoughts circled with cold precision, firing only when provoked. Yet every beam they unleashed rewrote the sky in fire. Kyle stood at the console, hands trembling. The voice, the one he now knew belonged to Mara Voss, still echoed in his mind. Her warning hadn't felt like a threat, it had felt like a line in the sand. And he was standing right on it. The surviving comms officer, a young Mirian with a cracked crystalline arm, tugged at Kyle's sleeve. "There's a shuttle landing in Dock 7, she said. "Terran signature." Kyle stared at her. "They're boarding." She nodded, terrified. "We don't have the strength to stop them." He turned toward the bridge doors just as the Admiral, bleeding, slumped but conscious, raised a shaking arm. "Don't go with them," he rasped. Kyle hesitated. "I just want answers." The Admiral's eyes blazed. "And you think they'll give you truth? You think they still remember what that is?" Kyle didn't reply. He turned and ran. He passed mangled corridors, fires smoldering behind blast doors. Bodies alien and human scattered like broken pieces of a life that had once felt stable. He pushed through the chaos, his boots ringing on metal plating that trembled with each impact from outside. Dock 7 was quiet. Too quiet. The hangar door opened with a hiss, and there she stood. Mara Voss, human real alive. She wore no armor, just a dark tactical coat and scarred gloves. Her face was harder now. Leaner eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but lit with something else, purpose. Behind her, a single Terran soldier stood watch helmet on rifle cradled. The power armor he wore gleamed black, matte as obsidian lined with faint green threads, pulsing like veins. Earth's new warriors. Kyle Mara said, her voice softer than before. "It's good to see you." He stared at her, struggling for words. "You're behind this, all of it." She nodded. "Not alone, but yes." "Why?" Mara exhaled, stepping forward. "After the war, Earth was in ruins. Cities' ash resources gone. We begged the Concord for help, aid, tech protection. They smiled, they promised, then they left us to rot." Kyle felt the weight in her voice. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real, bitter raw. "I buried my son under a collapsed sky dome while they debated policy in their silver palaces," she said. "They called us survivors, but what they meant was acceptable losses." Kyle's fist clenched. "So this is revenge?" "No," she said, "this is evolution." He took a step back. "You're killing them, Mara. Whole ships, entire crews. There are civilians on those worlds." Her jaw tightened. "There were civilians on Earth too." He flinched. "It's not the same." She looked at him with something that might have once been sympathy, isn't it? He turned away, breathing hard. "I believed in the Concord. I still do." "They used you," she said gently. "Just like they used all of us. I fought beside them. And they'll forget you the moment you're gone." He faced her. "Then why am I still alive?" "Because I remember," she said, "and because we still need you." Kyle stared at her. "To do what? Justify this? You think if I join it'll make this okay?" "No," she said, "but it will make it real. People trust you, Kyle. You still believe in something. We need that. Earth needs that." He laughed, bitter and low. "You're building an empire with fire, and you want me to be your conscience." She didn't blink yes. The silence between them stretched long and taut. Outside, the dreadnoughts loomed. Conquered vessels burned like candles. The future was ending and beginning in the same breath. Kyle's voice cracked. "And if I say no?" Her expression hardened. "Then you go down with the ship." He looked past her at the Terran soldier. Still silent, still watching. Not threatening, not yet. Mara stepped forward slowly. "You can't stop this," she said, "but you can shape what comes after." She held out her hand. "Come home." The words pierced something deep in him. Home. What was that anymore? He looked back down the corridor. Flames, ash, screams. Then at Mara, at the Terran soldier who gave him a small nod of recognition, and finally at her outstretched hand. "I need to know it's worth it," he said, voice hoarse. Her voice dropped. "You won't know?" "Not now. But if you stay here, you'll die." Wondering, Kyle looked at her hand again and took it. The fall of the Ecliptica. The docking bay closed behind him with a hiss of finality. Kyle followed Mara through the dim corridors of the Earth shuttle. The Terran soldier said nothing. A silent shadow behind them. The air inside was clean, cool, too clean. No smoke, no blood. The difference was jarring. As the shuttle pulled away, Kyle looked through the viewport. The Ecliptica burned. Its once pristine hull was pocked with glowing craters, its shields shredded. Fires raged across its dorsal decks. Dozens of Concord ships drifted nearby, some still fighting, most silent hulks. Debris formed a graveyard around them. "We gave them a chance," Mara said beside him. "They chose to fight." Kyle turned to her, jaw tight. They were blindsided. It was a celebration, not a battlefield. They should have known better than to celebrate while Earth still bled. The shuttle jolted as it entered the flagship's hangar bay. The interior was cavernous. Military gray lined with weapon racks, drone servitors, and Terran Marines in black armor. All silent, all watching. No one cheered, no one saluted. This wasn't a fleet drunk on victory. This was a machine mid-execution. Mara led him through security checkpoints without stopping. No one questioned her, no one dared. Eventually, they entered a lift that ascended through the ship's core. Kyle stared at the shifting lights in the shaft, his pulse a dull drumbeat in his ears. "You changed," he murmured. "So did Earth," she replied. The lift opened onto the command deck. The room was vast, ringed with stations, tactical displays, and a panoramic viewport that showed the galaxy in grim detail. Red markers blinked across Concord space. Whole sectors were dark. In the center stood a holomap, Earth's fleet a storm cloud sweeping across the stars. Kyle stepped closer. His stomach turned. Dozens of worlds, some he'd visited, were marked for conquest. Mara approached the console and tapped a control. A different map bloomed Earth itself. Cities rebuilt, shipyards glowing. Refugee zones turned into military academies. Children in uniform. Factories humming. It worked, she said softly. What did the pain, the silence, the betrayal? We turned it into strength. Kyle's eyes locked on the section of the map. His hometown flattened during the war. Now rebuilt green alive. How many died to make this happen, he asked. Mara didn't flinch. Fewer than would have died if we'd waited. He turned away. We're not the monsters they think we are, she said, stepping beside him. We're what they made us become. They're going to call this genocide, he said. She nodded. They already have, but it doesn't matter. History belongs to the survivors. The door behind them hissed open. Another officer entered. A woman Kyle didn't recognize. Tall, sharp eyes like ice. Target planets aligned, she reported. Fleet is ready, awaiting confirmation. Mara looked at Kyle. Now we show them what comes after survival. He stared at her, then at the display, then slowly at his own reflection in the viewport, ghost-like against the stars. You really think this will end it, he asked? That this won't make us into the thing we hate? Mara's voice was steady. It's already ended, now we rebuild. The officer turned to him. Orders, Commander Rener. The words struck like a bullet. Commander. Kyle didn't answer, couldn't. Then he looked again at the display, at the stars trembling beneath Earth's shadow, and he whispered the word, launch. The return to Earth. The stars gave way to blue. Earth filled the viewport like a memory made real. Kyle hadn't seen it in years. Not since before the Swarm War, before the Concord. Before everything changed, he hadn't realized how much he missed it until now. Clouds swirled like gentle ghosts over oceans too wide to comprehend. Continents gleamed with sprawling cities and green belts. Earth was alive, not just surviving, but thriving. As the shuttle pierced the atmosphere, the viewport dimmed, but Kyle never looked away. He saw the scars too. Whole coastlines altered by orbital bombardment. Regions once home to megacities, now replaced by fortress complexes and steel forests of vertical launch silos. He saw resilience. Mara stood beside him, silent, watching his reaction. They rebuilt all this, Kyle murmured, while the Concord held parades in space. Yes, she said. While they rationed us food cubes, we built factories underground. While they sent condolences, we trained children to shoot. And while they wrote history without us, we prepared to write our own. The shuttle descended toward a structure unlike anything Kyle remembered. The Cradle, Earth's new capital. It sat embedded into a mountain range, once known as the Rockies, though now its name had changed to something older, something in Terran, massive and dark. The Cradle looked more like a buried warship than a city. Antenna towers pierced the stratosphere. Railgun barrels lined the edges like teeth. Its central structure pulsed faintly with green-blue light, power lines from the fleet's core reactors. The shuttle touched down. Kyle followed Mara into the Cradle without resistance. Inside it was quiet, efficient, no clutter. Every wall was armored, every hallway monitored. Soldiers passed them without comment. Most bore no insignias. Just black fatigues and that ever-present emblem stitched into their shoulders, a broken Earth, ringed by stars gripped by two hands, one metal, one bone. Reclamation. They entered the command hall, a cathedral of war. Dozens of holograms floated above a sunken floor where officers barked commands and monitored conquest reports. But no shouting, no chaos, just calm, practiced precision. At the center was a raised platform where a single figure stood alone. General Ross. Kyle recognized him from old footage. He'd been dismissed by the Concord as a nationalist, a dissenter. Rumors said he vanished after the swarm counterstrike on the Sol system. Now he stood alive, tall, his silver-streaked hair combed back with military discipline and eyes like sharpened steel. You brought him, Ross said, voice low but commanding. He came willingly, Mara replied. Then he understands what's at stake. Kyle stepped forward. No, he said quietly, but I'm trying to. Ross studied him. That's more than most did. He turned toward a side corridor and gestured, walk with me. Kyle followed him into a quieter chamber lined with viewports, showing the Earth's night side aglow with life. Lights flickered from rebuilt cities. Drones zipped but between towers. Somewhere below, he could see children playing in a courtyard, laughing under security drones and gun towers. This was always going to happen, Ross said. The galaxy never feared us. That was their mistake. Kyle frowned. We were offered a seat at the table. They handed us a stool in the corner, watched us beg. We're not beggars, Kyle. We're the ones who survive what others can't imagine. Kyle turned to the window, but at what cost? Ross didn't answer right away. Then he said, you asked that after the first swarm landing too, but you still picked up a rifle. Kyle closed his eyes. He remembered His first kill? A swarm drone towering over a bunker breach, his fingers trembling on the trigger. The scream in his ears that had never fully gone away. Now the scream had returned, only it wasn't aliens this time. It was his own kind. "You think history will forgive us?" he asked. Ross tilted his head. "History won't remember anything we don't let it." The general turned and walked away. Kyle stood alone for a long moment, staring down at the Earth he once left behind. The First Order. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Kyle stood at the edge of the Cradle's war chamber, surrounded by silent tacticians glowing holomaps in the weight of what he had become. The galaxy was fractured. Concord command was dead or scattered. Earth's fleet occupied half the core systems. And now they were waiting for a voice, for the first unified command from a human not forged in Earth's ashes, but one forged among the stars. General Ross stood beside him, quiet and solemn. "You were the Concord symbol," he said. "Now you're ours." Kyle's throat tightened. "I didn't ask for this." "No one did," Mara added, stepping forward. "But we chose it, and now the galaxy will know. We did not rise in silence. We will not be forgotten again." Before Kyle, the central console flared to life. Communications synced, broadcast nodes aligned. Billions across the stars could hear this message. Civilizations on the brink. Rebels, survivors, warriors, doubters, all waiting. Kyle looked at Mara. At Reyes, at the glowing map of worlds he once swore to defend. Then he looked at Earth, bruised, risen, terrible, beautiful. He stepped to the console. His voice, hoarse but steady, filled the galaxy. "This is Commander Kyle Rener of Earth Command. To every world that mocked us, we remember. To every ally that left us starving, we remember. To those who call this revenge, I say no. This is reclamation." He paused, staring at the stars. "You left us to burn. Now we bring fire." The line closed. Silence followed. And then across the command deck, the order came. Fleet redeployment. Next systems targeted. Subjugation plans authorized. Kyle turned from the console, his expression unreadable. Mara approached him, her voice low. "Was that who you wanted to be?" He didn't answer, because the stars outside had begun to tremble. And Earth was now the center of the galaxy.